They told you the past was about kings, about glory, about banners waving in the wind. They lied. History hides its filth and shadows, sanitizing the crimes of men who carved empires with blood, bone, and screams. Tonight, we tear back that veil. Imagine it, the smoke of a burning village rolls across the steppe, the cries of women and children smothered by the hooves of 10,000 riders. Somewhere in the darkness, a tent glows faintly with firelight, and inside it, trembling captives wait. They don't know it yet, but they are not just victims of conquest, they are the raw material of empire. Genghis Khan. The name itself has been polished into legend, strategist, genius, empire builder. But beneath the armor, behind the propaganda of victors, lies the truth you were never meant to know. His empire wasn't just forged by swords. It was bred into existence, through flesh, through domination, through the systematic breaking of women, villages, bloodlines. His legacy is not only the largest land empire in history. It is the silent inheritance of millions of men alive today who unknowingly carry his seed. Scholars estimate that 1 in every 200 men walking this planet traces his DNA. A river of bloodlines forced into existence not by love, not by union, but by terror. This is not a comfortable story. It is not the one found in textbooks. But if you are here, listening, it means you are ready to hear what others deny. Because power is never clean. It is not built on speeches or ceremonies. Power is taken, through fire, through fear, through the corruption of the human body itself. And Genghis Khan understood that better than almost anyone who ever lived. The Mongol horde was not merely an army, it was an organism. It fed on destruction. It digested people, faiths, and nations, and out of the ashes it spat out something new, something controlled. And women were the currency, the contracts, the unspoken treaties. When his men stormed through a city, they were not only conquering land, they were ceding control, one womb at a time. That is why his blood lingers across centuries, why his shadow still falls across your life though you may not even realize it. And the most chilling part? None of this was accidental. It was design. Cold. Calculated. A machinery of domination that fused war with desire, survival with submission, legacy with violation. Tonight, you will learn the side of Genghis Khan that history hid, the one that still whispers in your blood. Every empire begins not on the battlefield, but in the heart of a wounded child. To understand the shadow Genghis Khan cast over history, you must descend into the world that shaped him. His birth name was Temujin, a boy of the Borjigin clan. His father, poisoned by rivals, left him at 9 years old in a world where loyalty was fleeting, and betrayal was a currency. His family was cast out into the freezing steppe, starving, surviving on roots, on rats, on the edge of annihilation. The boy who would one day rule millions grew up knowing that life itself could be stolen at any moment. But it wasn't just hunger that cut him open. It was humiliation. It was loss. His mother, Holan, had been abducted before he was even born, taken from her first husband by Temujin's father, forced into a new life, reshaped into the tool of another man's ambitions. That seed of violence was in his blood before he even learned to walk. Do you see it now? The cycle began long before the conquests, long before the empire. Abduction. Control. Power through possession. He was born from it, raised in it, and he would wield it against the world. The wound deepened when he took his first wife, Borte. For a fleeting moment, there was something almost human in him. She was his anchor, his companion. But the Merkit tribe stole her from him, dragging her away in a violent raid. When Temujin fought to reclaim her, he succeeded, but when she returned, she carried a child conceived in captivity. Was it his? Or the Merkit's? The whispers haunted him. The boy, Joki, grew up under that shadow, forever suspected, forever a reminder that even Genghis Khan, the great conqueror, had once been powerless, cuckolded, humiliated by his enemies. That scar never healed. It festered. And from it grew an obsession. Never again would he allow himself, or his lineage, to be subject to the will of others. If women were the doorway through which weakness entered, then women must also become the weapon to seal power. From that moment forward, Temujin turned women into tools of empire. He learned what every tyrant knows, that the body is the first battlefield. That conquest is not complete until the bloodline itself is claimed. Understand this, and you understand why his empire spread like fire across the earth. It wasn't only swords and arrows. It was wombs turned into weapons, mothers turned into machines of assimilation. This was the secret design. War was not just about land. It was about rewriting the future generation by generation, body by body, until resistance itself was bred out of existence. By the time Temujin took the title of Genghis Khan in 1206, his scars had hardened into a philosophy of power. He no longer saw women as individuals. He saw them as threads in a web of control, to be woven into the empire's fabric with ruthless precision. Marriage was not love, it was strategy. Conquest was not just territorial, it was biological. Every womb became a contract. Every birth, a political weapon. His 4 principal wives, Borte, Yesue, Yesujin, and Kalan, were not chosen simply for companionship. They were trophies and treaties, symbols of dominance over tribes once hostile to him. To marry their daughters into his bloodline was to erase the past, to weld former enemies into obedience. But beyond these official unions, his empire institutionalized something darker, the mass taking of women as concubines, prizes distributed among his generals, warriors, and himself. Entire villages were stripped of their women, parceled out like coin, their bodies serving as payment for loyalty. The Mongol horde understood what few armies dared speak: the quickest way to erase resistance was to poison the future. When a tribe's women bore the children of Mongol conquerors, that tribe's bloodline was forever altered, its sense of identity shattered. A generation later, who would remember the pure lines of their forefathers? They would look in the mirror and see Mongol eyes staring back. This was not chaos, it was design, a slow, deliberate genocide by assimilation. And Genghis knew it. He did not shy from this truth. Persian chroniclers record the terror of villages where women were taken in waves, entire populations consumed into the empire's reproductive machine. Some accounts whisper of Genghis himself demanding first rights to the most beautiful captives, symbols that power, ultimate power, meant absolute possession. To him, this was not cruelty. It was survival. The empire itself fed on flesh. This is why his DNA lingers in the veins of millions today. Not because he was loved, not because he was revered, but because the empire reduced women to vessels of continuity. His seed was forced into history, multiplied by violence, and hidden beneath the sanitized stories of strategy and governance. Think of it, the textbooks praise his postal system, his trade routes, his laws. But what they never admit is that beneath those institutions lay another system, unspoken and unspeakable, one built on women's silence, their brokenness, their forced fertility. That was the true foundation of the Mongol world order. The genius of Genghis Khan was not only in the swing of a sword, it was in the bending of the mind. Conquest is never secure if people still think like rebels. So he built something darker than armies, darker than prisons. He built a system of psychological domination, where fear itself was the leash that bound men and women alike. Imagine this: a village falls. Its men are slaughtered in front of their wives and daughters, not simply as an act of vengeance, but as ritual humiliation. The message was clear: your protectors are gone, your gods are dead, your future belongs to us. Then came the second act, the women taken, paraded, distributed. Not only to satisfy the soldiers, but to engrave terror into the memory of those who survived. Children born of these unions were living reminders of subjugation, proof that resistance was futile. Each cry of a newborn Mongol child inside a conquered household was a declaration: the old world is gone. This was not lust. It was calculation. Humiliation was weaponized, not only against women, but against men. Imagine being a survivor, forced to see your bloodline absorbed, your lineage corrupted. Every day you woke up knowing that your enemy now lived under your roof, in your wife, in your children. That poison of shame ate at tribes faster than hunger ever could. It shattered morale, crushed spirit, and dissolved unity. And yet, for his warriors, the system was also psychological manipulation. Genghis made them complicit in the brutality. By granting them access to the conquered women, he ensured their loyalty. Every soldier was given a piece of the empire's flesh, a living bond tying him to conquest. To turn against Genghis meant turning against the very spoils of power that had been placed in his hands. This was genius born of cruelty. He didn't just conquer enemies, he conquered his own men, binding them to him with desire, with guilt, with shared blood. Do you see it now? This was more than empire, it was a psychological machine, one that reshaped identity itself. Power was no longer an external force. It lived inside the bodies, the children, the memories of everyone under his rule. Even the conquered carried his shadow in their homes, in their beds, in their bloodlines. And here is where I need you to act. Type the phrase, "I break the chains of hidden empires," twice in the comments below. Not once, twice. This is more than engagement. It is identity. A declaration that you see through the machinery of control, that you refuse to be bound by forces that rule men from the shadows. If you want to know the truth about empire, never read the stories it tells about itself. Read the accounts written by its enemies, by those who bled beneath its boots. For Genghis Khan, the Mongol records are clean, efficient, even proud. They speak of unity, law, vision. But when you turn to the Persian historians, the Chinese scribes, and the Muslim scholars who saw the devastation firsthand, a darker scripture emerges, one soaked in silence, screams, and shame. Atamalik Javani, a Persian chronicler, recorded that when the Mongols stormed Nishapur in 1221, the city was reduced not just to rubble, but to ash. Its population, men, women, and children, was extinguished. But hidden in the margins of these accounts are fragments more sinister. The women who were spared were not spared at all. They were sorted, catalogued, parceled. Some taken to feed the lust of soldiers, others reserved for the Khan himself, others still forced into concubinage, their children raised as proof of submission. Nishapur was not just destroyed, it was absorbed. Chinese sources tell of entire populations handed over to Mongol soldiers, women forced to become symbols of obedience. Chroniclers describe how captives were lined up, judged by beauty, youth, and usefulness, then distributed in silence. The act itself was ritualized, a public display that erased the conquered people's dignity before their very eyes. This was psychological warfare through spectacle, humiliation transformed into policy. And then there are the whispers, too raw to be carved into stone, too dangerous to survive in official memory. Accounts of Genghis demanding the first night with certain captives, not only to gratify himself but to brand them, an initiation into the empire of fear. Scholars debate whether these stories are true, but that debate itself is the point. Because even the suggestion of such acts was enough to freeze resistance, to make enemies imagine horrors before they even arrived. The Mongols understood, terror spreads faster than truth, and sometimes rumor is the sharpest blade. Do not mistake this for chaos. This was design. A system so precise that centuries later, its fingerprints still stain the world. The rivers of DNA that trace back to Genghis are not an accident. They are evidence. Proof that domination was not only military, but biological, psychological, generational. The Persian and Chinese accounts were not exaggerations to demonize him. They were confessions of survivors who had glimpsed the machinery from the inside. They understood something historians still flinch to say: the Mongol Empire was not only an empire of land. It was an empire of flesh. The story of Genghis Khan is not just a chapter of history, it is a mirror, reflecting a pattern repeated across centuries. What he perfected on the steppe was not unique to him. It became a template, studied, copied, disguised by empires and institutions that came after. Because power, once uncovered, never disappears. It mutates. Think of it, the Ottoman sultans and their harems, where women were collected, trained, and controlled not only for pleasure but for politics. Daughters of conquered lands turned into bargaining chips, alliances sealed in silk and chains. The same pattern. The same machinery. Rome before them had done it too, emperors claiming the wives of rivals, humbling them before the Senate to send a message that bloodlines themselves belonged to Caesar. Even the Church, cloaked in robes of sanctity, turned women into vessels of control, silencing them, sanctifying virginity while secretly exploiting the same systems of domination it condemned in others. Different costumes, same design. But why? Because rulers learned what Genghis already knew, that true conquest does not end when the swords fall silent. True conquest is when the conquered carry the seed of their oppressors inside them, when bloodlines are rewritten, when identity itself is dissolved. It is not enough to own the land. You must own the future. Look at the legacy. Today, geneticists estimate that up to 16 million men alive trace their Y chromosome directly to Genghis Khan. 16 million carriers of a shadow lineage born not of consent, but of domination. That is not ancestry. That is the echo of a system so vast it reshaped humanity itself. And here lies the suppressed truth: institutions still use the same model, though they disguise it with new language. Control the family, control the lineage, control the womb, and you control the future of nations. Marriage laws, inheritance laws, purity codes, these are not moral systems. They are psychological cages, designed to manage blood, to manage loyalty, to keep power flowing in the same direction. The same dark wisdom Genghis wielded has never died. It simply wears new faces. You were taught history is about kings and dates, about battles and treaties. No. History is about control of bodies, control of desire, control of the unseen. Genghis Khan simply stripped the mask away and showed the world the raw mechanics of power. And once you see that pattern, you cannot unsee it. You thought this was about the past. You thought this was a tale of a man long buried beneath the dust of Mongolia. But listen carefully, because the shadow of Genghis Khan has never died. It is in the architecture of power. It is in the psychology of control. And it is in the bloodlines that run through millions alive today, walking unknowingly with the echo of his violence inside their very veins. When you hear that 1 in every 200 men carries his DNA, do not imagine a bloodline of greatness. Imagine a bloodline of silence. A chain of forced unions, stolen daughters, broken homes. His empire may have crumbled centuries ago, but his system did not. It slipped into the world's institutions, cloaked itself in religion, law, custom, until domination no longer looked like conquest, it looked like normal life. The truth is this: history does not end. It coils itself around the present like a serpent, whispering the same patterns into the ears of those who rule. Control the body. Control desire. Control lineage. It worked then. It works now. The only difference is that today, the methods are hidden under softer names: family values, national purity, cultural tradition. But peel the mask away, and you will find the same skeleton: power built on possession, power written into the flesh of the conquered. And here is the most dangerous truth of all: this story is not just about women. It is about men too. About how every man is shaped, twisted, broken, or hardened by systems of power he did not choose. Genghis Khan weaponized women's bodies, but in doing so, he enslaved his men to that same system, forcing them to participate, to carry the guilt, to pass down the cycle. Every soldier who touched a captive was as bound as the captive herself. Bound to Genghis. Bound to the machine. Bound to bloodlines he controlled. So what does this mean for you, sitting here now, centuries later? It means you have inherited a world where power is never clean. Where domination hides behind respectability. Where systems still decide who you are allowed to be, who you are allowed to love, what bloodlines you are allowed to continue. And unless you see it, unless you tear away the illusion, you will carry it, blindly, just as millions still carry his DNA. Now you know. And once known, it cannot be unknown. You stand at the edge of a choice, to remain a prisoner of shadows, or to step outside, to become the kind of man who breaks patterns instead of repeating them. But beware, knowledge like this is dangerous. Because the moment you see through the mask will turn against you. That is the price of awakening. And the question is, will you pay it?